Now, I know what you're gonna say. But no, this isn't a Gundam game. Well, it pains me to say that as far as mecha action games go, Gundam has not fared the best. In fact, the best Gundam games were actually on portable consoles such as the PSP, in the form of the Battle series. But more on that another time. Today we are here to look at what I consider the best that the mecha genre has to offer. Zone of the Enders and, more importantly, its sequel, the second runner. Developed by KONAMI early on in the PS2 generation, Zone of the Enders, at least from a gameplay perspective, gets a lot more right than most of its peers. So strap yourselves in, because today we are going to analyze the mechanics, characters, graphics, and the story, and understand what makes this game the best of the best when it comes to mecha. The world of Zone of the Enders is a bleak one to say the least. War is raging between Earth and Mars, and superweapons are constantly being developed by either side to help gain the upper hand on one another. The characters themselves are either completely devoid of hope, or they have become such a twisted variation on themselves that it becomes difficult to empathize with them on any level. It is easy to start to draw parallels between this game and the Gundam franchise, as both take a similar approach on how weaponry works in their worlds. The most advanced form of mecha in the Enders universe is known as the orbital frame, a superweapon series made using a lightweight, powerful, and durable material known as Metatron, which can only be mined on Callisto. Right away you are thrust into the conflict. A mysterious woman is speaking on what appears to be her commander on the radio, stating that 2 frames are set to be retrieved from the colony orbiting Jupiter. He goes on to say,
"To complete this mission, you are expected to make whatever sacrifices are necessary."
Even if it costs us the colony.
Viola.
the game makes no secret about who the bad guys are, and honestly there is no moral grey area either. The frame designs are appropriate and provide clear distinctions on what is and isn't a target. It is here that we are thrown into the perspective of Leo Stenbuck, who, as you will find out, was clearly based on Shinji Ikari of Evangelion, albeit he isn't quite as hopeless as Shinji is. Leo is out in the conflict looking for somewhere to hide, after his friends are killed. I kinda need to mention here that the flashback sequence that the sequel shows, and the way it actually happened in the original, give off 2 completely different impressions. In the original, his friends are pleading with him to save them, and blame him for the predicament that they find themselves in. The flashback sequence still shows them tied up, but they only say, This makes it seem as though they already knew they were screwed, and so they told Leo to run away while he still could. This is an incredibly odd choice as, from my perspective, it simplifies some of Leo's trauma. Losing your friends due to an act of war is in no way easy, but imagine towards the end of their life they blamed you for pretty much everything that they found themselves in at that time. At that point, the trauma of losing them on top of the fact that they hated you all this time would seriously have an effect on your psyche. Leo catches a glimpse of the frame responsible, and proceeds to book it to the closest building. It is here that the hopeful music starts to click in, as we catch our first shot of the main frame of the series, the one, the only, Jehuti. Couple of explosions later, and at long last, the game begins. This first section gives you your first taste of the combat and movement mechanics. Combat is broken down into 3 main attack structures: homing, distance, and melee. How you choose to make use of these capabilities is up to you, with each having its own advantages and disadvantages. For example, melee attacks are great for clearing a room quickly, however you are also immediately putting yourself in danger, as the enemy can often have powerful melee attacks of their own. Additionally, you also have super attacks that are known as bursts. They don't pull from a bar and can be used infinitely. However, the trade-off to this is that they have a long startup time. The primary advantage that you have in this game is the ability to boost, and this factors into your movement speeds both in and out of combat. See, most mecha-based games are focused on a very linear movement structure, and whilst the actual fundamentals of movement aren't all that different here, being that the combat structure still makes use of your lock-on heavily, the freedom you have to maneuver in this 3D space is what sets Zone of the Enders apart from its peers. You are encouraged from the start to constantly be on the move and make use of vertical and horizontal movements, thereby making full use of the 3D space that's available to you. Which then of course means you can find yourself attacking an enemy from every angle imaginable. Moving on from the introductory fight, you are also introduced to the healing mechanics in the game, which is done by obtaining Metatron cubes scattered throughout the environment. The cubes pretty much restore you back to full health, as if brand new, and in the game's context it is explained that orbital frames can absorb Metatron from various sources in order to recover or evolve, which plays a vital role in the events to come. Here you also get your first glimpse into the visuals that the game will present you with, and in all honesty, it leaves a lot to be desired. The PS2's limited draw distance meant that the large areas that the game was attempting to portray in specific sections were lifeless and uninspired. taking on a typically futuristic setting without any sense of polish or detail. The characters themselves are designed well enough, and try to fit in with an anime aesthetic. However, the problem here is that they aren't exactly cel-shaded, which means that they make use of standardized 3D textures and try to portray this. For me, this made expressions seem a little awkward to say the least, as well as movements coming off as stiffer than perhaps intended. What the game exceeds graphically is with its mecha design, with each one oozing detail taking on a unique aesthetic of their own. The art design for the game was done by Yoji Shinkawa, famed artist of the Metal Gear series, and you can tell he brought his A-game here. On top of looking like futuristic machines of war, the frames are filled with indents that serve a purpose within the game. The lights going across the body of Jehuti serve the dual purpose of showing off the aesthetics, as well as being an indicator for Jehuti's health status, with it slowly becoming red as your health bar depletes. Jehuti itself is also outfitted with additional specularity and refraction details that make it pop out from the rest of its peers, making it clear that this frame is a cut above the rest. The artist also saw fit to add a literal cockpit. This looks especially hilarious when the frame enters flight mode, but as you continue to play the game, you almost forget that it's even there, given the velocity of your actions. You are introduced to your second major character here, Ada, the onboard AI for the orbital frame Jehuti. I kinda enjoyed her interactions in this game, mostly because she seemed to have been programmed with an overclocked SAS chip, which forces her to pretty much sarcastically respond to literally everything Leo says, even when Leo is actually trying to make a valid point. Leo has confronted her with the burden of both somehow effectively being able to pilot Jehuti and the desire for revenge upon confronting the frame that killed his friends. This is where we are properly introduced to our antagonist, Viola, who is piloting the orbital frame, Nath. Viola is something of a wild card in this game. That is to say that she starts off almost devoid of any emotion till the moment she realizes that the person she just tried to kill couldn't have been much older than 13. This affects her on a psychological level, but not in the way that you might think. In fact, she becomes obsessed over the idea that she cannot overcome his piloting capabilities, constantly hunting him throughout the game outside of her assigned mission parameters, and slowly succumbing to the idea that Leo may just be her superior in every conceivable way. Her pride is hurt in the first battle, and in the following cutscene you get the impression that she will be an unrelenting force in her pursuits.
You embarrassed me this time, so look forward to the next time. See you again, boy.
After defeating Viola in a one-on-one battle, Leo starts to show visible signs of mental strife. Having taken a few lives and having used Jehuti to do so, Ada starts to pick up on the mental strain that Leo is experiencing, remarking that this would only hamper his efficiency in combat. Some medical advice and sass later, Leo receives a transmission from a woman named Elena. She mentions that she has seen Leo fight, and seeing what he is capable of, he is the logical choice for piloting Jehuti for the time being. She explains that the frame was meant to be delivered by her colleague, however something has gone wrong, and Leo is now the only one capable of doing the job. Leo seems to think that she is a murderer despite her explaining her purpose, often making statements like, "I don't kill like you guys." Preaching this, he makes it clear time and time again that he will only be doing this for them, and that's the end of that, to which Elena reluctantly agrees. Here you are introduced to the main method of travel in the game, a sort of overworld which encompasses the colony. You are able to drop down to various areas of the colony to engage in battles, or to find various secret items that will unlock something elsewhere in the game, or give Jehuti newer and stronger abilities. It is worth mentioning that the game takes a more RPG-based approach in this regard, meaning that aside from, I think, the sniper and the decoy, all of these other sub-weapons are completely optional, and you could go the entire game without obtaining them, which is kinda what I did, much to my dismay. On lower difficulties, this isn't much of an issue, but if you played on the highest difficulty like I did, you would have felt very under-equipped. Jehuti can also level up, thereby boosting its stats exponentially, and definitely making the game a lot easier if you're willing to grind, further demonstrating its RPG mechanics. I think the level cap is something like level 8, but I never got around to checking that myself. Ada points out that a nearby sector of the colony is being destroyed. Leo realizes that the sector in question is where his father was. They go down to investigate only to find that the place has been reduced to rubble, leaving almost no survivors, save for one. We're introduced here to Sylvise Klein, the clear love interest for Leo, and the one that snaps him out of his less than shonen behavior. Sylvise mentions needing to see if the people in the church are okay, to which Leo responds with a speech about self-preservation. Some minutes later, Sylvise climbs aboard Jehuti, and they prepare to escape, however, not before the next game mechanic is introduced. I would like to say that these are epic and grand, but for the most part they possess very simple attack patterns and very large areas of attack. There are a grand total of 3, and they essentially function as an ending to each section of the map. The cheapest of the 3 being the Tyrant, given its large size and ability to attack in such a wide area using its charge ability. With the right amount of frustration, you are more than capable of defeating these guys. A few homing lasers and some patience later, you manage to defeat the first of these bosses. Leo refuses to kill the pilot, to which Ada responds with the appropriate amount of sass.
Your question does not compute. Why not destroy it?
Sylvise begins to act as Leo's moral compass here, goading him to explore other parts of the colony and to help where he can. It's up to you whether or not you want to listen to her advice, as it's the game's way of encouraging you to obtain additional abilities and level up for the battles ahead. As far as I know, there isn't any special unlock that comes from doing as she advises, so there wasn't really any incentive for me to push forward with these actions, aside from perhaps gaining an additional ability. Your biggest mission here is to disable the EPS generator that is powering the orbital frames in the area, which in turn will allow you to save the colony, and accomplish the mission to deliver Jehuti to Elena. To do this, you need to face a fair few challenges, involving the destruction of various vector traps in the area, as well as fending off the various forces. You're required to gather various passcodes to access newer areas, some over or underground as you disable the generators accordingly. The missions themselves aren't anything to write home about, however there are 2 very intense missions that the game puts you through, and they stuck in my mind as highlights. The first is that you have to find and control an unmanned enemy raptor in order to bypass a shield that Jehuti simply cannot get past. This mission sounds totally ridiculous on the outset because you've pretty much destroyed every raptor you have come across, and in doing so you are left kind of confused. However, Ada makes mention that there is a raptor in the area that hasn't been totally destroyed, but that controlling it remotely can be fatal for Jehuti's internal programming. More on that later. You take control and you manage to destroy that section of the EPS generator. The raptor actually starts out at a much higher level than you, and I praise the game for further allowing you to experience the enemy frame perspective, thereby demonstrating the power difference between your mech and the enemies. You grow an appreciation for Jehuti's smoother, more controlled movements, as the raptor seems very stiff by comparison. The second mission is a consequence of the previous. You have to obtain a decoy module so you're able to fight one of the giant frames yet again, however controlling the raptor has forced Ada into a state of decay. Her programming has been disrupted by a virus and thereby is disrupting a lot of the normal functions such as healing using Metatron cubes. You are tasked with finding an antivirus program, and yes, I am calling it that because the game uses the term vaccine, which is completely inaccurate. I mean, the term alone is pretty stupid to use here, but I get that they were going for simplicity over accuracy. After Ada has been restored, you obtain the decoy, you showdown with the cheapest of the giant bosses, and you allow the pilot to live yet again. This may come off as Leo being stubborn, but they are important character moments for Ada, as she begins to understand why Leo is so stubborn about life and the preservation of it. You get another call from Elena, where Leo once again pulls a high roader and calls everyone murderers.
Don't think that I'm a killer just like you.
Elena in this rare moment opens up, sharing with him that the horrors of this war have affected her personally, as her boyfriend was killed by Barham. Yes, I forgot to mention that Barham is the name of the enemy forces attacking the colony, and shortly before you pilot Jehuti, they killed a lot of the colony residents, including Elena's boyfriend. This in turn makes her a more sympathetic character, and Leo begins to understand her plight more than he did before. You are tasked with rendezvousing with her colleague, Rock Thunderheart, who, by the way, has the coolest name in the franchise. You'll be the one you deliver Jehuti to, and finally bring an end to Leo's involvement in the war, right?
No.
You fly onward, and after navigating a series of mountains, you finally confront your final giant boss. This one requires you to be far more agile than you were before, but can be won through a battle of attrition, timing burst attacks and using your homing lasers as much as physically possible. After destroying the frame and sparing the life of the pilot, you are treated to one more confrontation on the colony with everyone's favourite villainess, Viola, and this time she seems to really want to destroy you, pulling tricks such as paralysis, homing lasers, and incomprehensible speed in order to really get the jump on you. She is infuriating on higher difficulties, but with perseverance you find yourself able to defeat her. Her post-defeat cutscene seems to highlight a personality trait of hers if you've been paying attention, a desire to die in combat.
Why don't you just kill me now?
But in order to understand the reason, you not only need to get to the end of the game, but you will also need to watch the Idolo movie in order to further understand exactly how she feels. Don't worry though, old news got you covered here in due time. Leo in tears decides to spare her, and this leads to her pride being hurt by the fact that an angry child is compassionate towards her plight. You finally make it to Rock Thunderheart, his name I seriously cannot get over, and he states that there have been bombs planted all over the colony, and that Leo is the only one capable of using Jehuti's abilities to stop the bombs completely. Naturally, he seems to reject the idea entirely, however we see the consequence of his previous actions in the form of Viola shooting Selvice. Ada, this whole game, has been telling Leo that he needs to kill his enemies, and that they will come back to hurt or kill him in return. Viola is the expression of this warning, and I commend the game for being able to bring this full circle. Viola escapes after telling him where she will be waiting, and this motivates Leo to go and save the colony one last time. A cutscene plays out where we get an insight into Leo's past, where he states that his mother and father were getting a divorce and were fighting over who has to now take care of Leo.
They weren't arguing to get me. They both wanted to get rid of me.
He remarks that he felt completely unwanted by both, and when Ada asks why he chose to continue helping, he says that he finally feels needed by others, further mirroring Shinji, who continued to use the Eva because he felt wanted by his father. His words, not mine. Ada shares a tender moment, stating that she doesn't want Leo to die because she is now one of those that need him.
I am.
What?
I am one of those who need you.
And they say machines can't have feelings. You enter the area of the colony where Viola is waiting, with a now morphed and twisted variant of her frame, stating that Nath is immortal. You disarm the bombs and enter the final showdown with her. This for me was the easiest of the bosses, and I think that is partially due to her being in the damaged state already. Once defeated, she is thrust out of the colony by one of the remaining bombs and is hurled into Jupiter's orbit. Leo asks if there is a way to save her, to which Ada advises that he shouldn't and that he may also be caught in orbit. I think it's best here that I just play out this cutscene for you.
Still you insult me. Don't even consider it. If you save me, I will fight you again, and I will kill you. I'll kill the people that are precious to you first, and then you. And you won't be the last. I'll continue to kill even after that.
But you'll...
I was beaten by such a naive brat.
Viola.
I have lost everything. I survived many battles. I lost my parents and my lover. I don't have the functions of a woman now. Even then, I have continued to live. Right. To survive was the only purpose to life. To survive is my life. In battle, there's a slight gap between life and death. Those who were killing were themselves dead a moment later. I killed innocent children and even my comrades to save myself. Soaking in their blood and eating their flesh, I managed to live this long. It is not a matter of my luck. It was only my vibrant power that kept me alive. I survived through my own strength. You ruined it for me. Who the hell are you? What am I inferior to you in? Have you ever experienced any hardship in your life? Your very existence itself denies mine. Time to end it. Finally, I am finished. My ill-fated days forever over. Boy, will you answer one stupid question?
Yes. What is it?
Was I strong?
It's hard to believe that I'm still alive.
Is that so? Thank you.
The target is disintegrating.
Viola?
Beautiful. You knew how beautiful the stars really are.
Viola!
Brought 'em. At last, I can be with you.
Here we finally understand why it is that Viola wanted to die. It is because she has experienced loss that has destroyed her on the inside, the loss of Radium, the one person in this world that she loved. This tragedy hurled her into an unending combat cycle, with the expressed desire not to come out the other side. I think now is a good time to talk about the frames in a bit more depth here, especially with the links I've drawn from each one. Each of the frames is named after or makes some reference here to Egyptian mythology, for which Jehuti and Nath are the primary inheritors of the concepts. Jehuti is another name of an Egyptian god named Thoth, or Tot depending on where you're from, who was very much linked to wisdom with the ancient Egyptians. He had two main roles, to settle godly disputes and to record the actions of Anubis. He is an interesting choice here because I feel like in a way the developers did lean into the idea of what he was before and what he became as the myths began to evolve. He started out as the god of the moon and was tasked with measuring time without relying on Ra, the sun god. As the Egyptian rituals and events began to evolve, so too did Thoth's role as the god of wisdom, being a sort of observer and a learner of these traditions. Likewise, Ada learns from Leo, a human, what it means to preserve life and to feel needed, thus obtaining her own wisdom, and beginning to understand what it means to be human. Leo is the event that is observed by Ada, and therefore Jehuti, which leads to her ability to understand his plight and beliefs. These shape her decisions and interactions in the second game greatly, as now she is able to weigh judgments with a more human outlook on everything. Nath is also a god found in Egyptian mythology, and was associated primarily with hunting and war, both of which align with Viola greatly. Throughout the game, Viola is hunting for Leo for the express purpose of doing battle with him, and she herself is an active member of the Bahram forces, therefore acting as an agent of war. She acts as the expression of this goddess, embodying her, albeit from a more warped perspective. Viola dies, and then you are interrupted by another orbital frame, the first to truly outclass you in this game. This is Anubis, and it moves at blinding speeds. This is a scripted battle and there's no way to win, with Elena providing you with an escape. After escaping, you find that Leo has developed a strong bond with Ada. However, Ada reveals that her purpose this whole time was to destroy Almon, by self-destructing!
Jehuti will self-destruct?
The events conclude here and aren't revisited until the second game, and for me, this is where things really start to improve. The second game isn't just any mecha game for me. It is the mecha game. The one that laid the groundwork for compelling mecha action that has not been topped since. The sequel opens up with our new protagonist, Dingo Egret, a miner on Callisto who happens to be investigating a strange energy source. The strange energy source is none other than our orbital frame Jehuti, who appears to have been abandoned on Callisto. Graphically, the game has seen a massive improvement from the previous. In addition to keeping all of the details that were mentioned in the previous game, the sequel also uses the draw distance of the PS2 to its advantage, creating more enclosed areas of combat for the game that can be observed directly by the player. Jehuti itself seems to have received a color palette swap, opting for a more silver-based color scheme over the previous brown ones. The cutscenes have also been altered significantly. Instead of using 3D models for the human interactions, the team at Konami decided that the cutscene should be fully animated as an anime sequence, which in a way makes the game feel more timeless as the cutscenes remain fluid, clean, and age well over time. The sequel doesn't mess around. You are immediately thrown into a heavy combat scenario, and although the control scheme is the same for the most part, Jehuti's fluidity has seen an improvement here. Rather than having to static scuffle with the enemy orbital frames, the game makes clear the impact of your movements, with every melee shot that you land. Additionally, burst attack charge times are reduced significantly, meaning burst shots can be done faster and are now fit for purpose in the moment-to-moment gameplay. Grab's seen improvement too. Where you had to remain still in order to use a grab in the previous game, you can now move around freely when you've grabbed an enemy, allowing for more strategic usage of this action. You can even grab objects in your environment and use them as makeshift weapons. Sometimes this is a necessity later on in the game. The story of the sequel is far less philosophically involved than the previous game, but does still deal with the effects of war, the meaning of being a soldier, betrayal, and comradeship. Upon discovering the orbital frame Jehuti, Dingo has to fight his way through Callisto and fend off the Bahram attack. The game uses this Callisto area as one massive tutorial section, especially with the upcoming boss fight. You meet another pilot named Ken, and she pilots the orbital frame Arjet. This fight actually forces you to use all of the abilities you've learned so far, with Ken's attack making use of wisps, which require homing lasers to beat, close-range combat, which requires you to use melee, and unblockable burst attacks which force you to move effectively. After defeating her, you make your way to the attacking Bahram ship, and you cut your way through the opposing force. This game ramps up the difficulty here, creating variations in the original combat structure from the previous game, allowing enemies to move almost as fast as you and creating ways to multiply enemies. You find your second boss here, the orbital frame Nephthys, and astute players would immediately notice the similarities between this frame and a certain other frame from a previous game. You are forced to use the environmental weapons here to defeat it, and a cutscene reveals that the pilot of the frame is an AI copy of Viola, the antagonist of the previous game. Dingo learns a bit about the previous events of the game through Ada's narration, where he learns of Viola's death and other events that happened during his absence. A resonance interrupts this, and upon moving to the next area, you meet the true main boss of the game, Anubis.
Give that orbital frame back.
Piloted by Commander Noman. This fight is also scripted and does not allow you to win, but unlike the previous game, you can land a few hits. I feel like this was intentional and that the gameplay was actually an excellent way to demonstrate the difference between this protagonist and the previous. A cutscene reveals that Dingo was part of Bahram, indicating that he has previous experience piloting orbital frames. This explains why the gameplay feels so much better. Where you were playing as a kid who just so happened to be able to pilot a giant mecha, you are now fighting as an army veteran. So of course you're going to be a far more effective fighter. This cutscene provides a bit of backstory. Noman attempts to recruit Dingo back into Bahram, which he refuses because he sees Noman as responsible for a mission previously going horribly wrong.
Do you realize how many of my comrades died back there? Say it. You killed them!
I wouldn't know.
You devil! Dingo!
Noman shoots him in response. This shocked the hell out of me when I played it for the first time, and I was anticipating that maybe Leo comes back to pilot Jehuti. But a time skip later is revealed that Ken has been hiding Dingo's body for several months so that she could revive him using Jehuti. The revival scene is kind of horrifying. And sets up what is to come with the concept of Metatron. Once Dingo is awake, Ken explains to Dingo that the only way he can stay alive is whilst aboard on Jehuti, which he tests and immediately regrets. She further explains that she is a spy sent into Bahram and that she wants to work with him to finally stop Noman. Reluctantly, Dingo agrees and proceeds to make his way off the station. Your task here is to find a Space Force soldier named Taper, who just so happens to know the location of something called the Vector Cannon. It is explained by Ken that the cannon can penetrate the outer shell of Almon, which you need to help destroy it. An interesting search section is conducted where Taper gives you hints as to where he is and what container he is hiding in. The hints are based on what he can see, what he can observe, and what he can hear. And it sort of works like a station-sized game of Marco Polo. I kind of liked it. It was a nice little break from the action-heavy gameplay, with minimal enemy interactions and an emphasis on communications. Finding Taper, he discusses the Vector Cannon and its location, after which you are tasked with escorting him off the space station. This bit can either be easy or unrelentingly difficult depending on your navigational skills and your combat efficiency, and honestly it doesn't really overstay its welcome either. Taper heads off the station using the catapult and, with Nephthys on your tail, you make your way off the station too. You land in a desert area where you manage to encounter an enemy that sounds familiar, and pilots the goddamn Vic Viper! You manage to defeat him, and Ada, being the perceptive little AI that she is, identifies the pilot as Leo Stenbuck.
What else can you say if you're not with Bahram?
You must be Leo Stenbuck.
You know him?
Ada.
Long time no see. You remember me?
Yes, the data is a perfect match with the previous runner.
You haven't changed a bit.
you're the owner of this frame, aren't you?
That's right.
Leo explains that he was the one who hid Jehuti on Callisto, as he wasn't willing to let it go to Almon. He lets Dingo know that Ada intends to blow up the frame when it reaches Almon, to which Dingo reacts like,
Are you sure?
It is true.
Wait a second! What's going on? Whose order is that?
It's a command which arose from the basis of a program.
The basis of a program? Are you kidding me? Who would allow such a thing? Hey, Ada, I won't allow you to do that!
You're worried as if it concerns you.
Well, it does!
This is the meaning of the existence bestowed upon me.
Are you stupid? How can you throw away your life for no reason?
I don't need any reasons.
Alright, I get rid of Almon. Then you don't need to blow up Jehuti. Isn't that right?
What?
And then, once Almon is destroyed, you'll be alive. That's enough, isn't it? You should take time to think about the meaning of your existence later.
This is a bit of a subjective sequence. When I was younger, I always interpreted it as Dingo not wanting to die, but when I really thought about it as an adult, I started to think Dingo may have reacted this way because Ada is currently his war comrade. And given that Noman allowed his last squad to die for what he deems to be a worthless reason, he doesn't want another comrade to suffer the same fate. Ken gives you your next objective to head to the town of Vasilia, and to make your way to the location of the vector cannon. You're presented with a similar scenario here to the previous game. The entrance of Vasilia is blocked by a shield and you need to destroy 2 generators before proceeding. After an action-heavy combat section or 2, you reach the next boss of the area, which is none other than Viola once again. You don't have the same weaponry that you were able to use previously, and so Ada suggests using metal plates as shields to paralyze her after her burst attacks. I give this game creativity points on its boss battles, and it reminds me a lot of the boss battle rhythms from Metal Gear Solid. This battle takes place in 2 chunks, with the second section forcing you to dodge as she charges towards you. She then hits the electrified fence, and this is your chance to attack her. With this boss battle done, the game doesn't slow down, as it throws you into a massive city protection segment, which really puts your skills to the test. Enemies are so numerous and are unrelenting, and on top of having to exterminate them, you also need to protect your surroundings, and it's pretty insane, but it only gets more crazy after that. The captain of the Space Force berates you, and after Dingo threatens to murder him, you get a transmission from Taper, giving his location, and your next task is to make your way there. Unfortunately, a train full of Barum forces is also on their way there. And guess who has to destroy it? God, this game is so full of action, how can I be mad? The train destroyed, you receive a further transmission from Ken. She berates Dingo for making jokes about a spy being caught, says that she is coming to the location, and expresses that she is doing her best for him despite the fact that he seems to downplay her role. Taper then calls and says that he sees a frame incoming, wondering if it's you. Spoiler, it isn't, and his entire platoon is straight up destroyed. You arrive on the scene where Ada tells you everyone and everything has been destroyed. You enter the building and you discover the source of the destruction. It is Nephthys once again, and this time, she is ready to put an end to this. You have no shield, you have no field, you have no poles. So Ada suggests perhaps the single greatest strategy ever. Use the surrounding enemies as a shield. You defeat her, and Dingo expresses regret, remembering his time at Barum and referring to Viola as a comrade. This theme is one that echoes significantly with Dingo's character, and the one he takes most seriously given the importance he places on the idea of comradeship that is obtained in war. Taper overhears this and threatens to kill Dingo, like that's even possible. Ken shows up and her frame gets possessed by the Viola AI. Ken pleads for help, and Ada suggests that you will need to delete the AI, but this can only be done if Jehuti is able to grab a hold of it. You will need to figure out a way to paralyze the frame once again, which can be done through timed sword impact parries. This is the last boss battle you will find that requires you to use your brain like this. And it's a shame because the creative solutions are something that I greatly enjoyed. You finally delete the bitch and this leaves Ken without an AI, meaning she cannot at all pilot her frame. Some really, really poor flirting later, you can carry Ken up to the top of the factory, and she jumps into your frame. Dingo suggests visiting an old Barum scientist named Lloyd, who will be able to give Jehuti the boost in power it needs in order to match Anubis in a fight. You make your way to the canyons and you get further insight into the characters here. Ken mentions that her father was part of Barum, and then begins to ask questions regarding why Dingo left and why he never came back.
Didn't you want to avenge the deaths of your pals?
What could I have done?
You could have returned to Bahram and risen in revolt. If you did, everyone would have been on your side.
Noman had been trying to kill me. If I did go back, he would kill me. Actually, that's what happened.
But
you saw it, didn't you?
even knowing Bahram was wrong, you still agreed to work for Noman? Use power for the right things. At least for the things that you believe in.
So who's secondhand?
Huh?
It's not easy, is it?
But I'm...
Forget it. Let's talk about it after all our work is done.
But...
We have no time, right?
The way Dingo reacted at the very least seems very realistic. He was outgunned, outnumbered, and he would be in the same situation if he decided to go back and revolt against Bahram. This next section requires you to take directions from Ken as you navigate through a minefield. I always hated stages like this in other games, and it's no different here. If you are off center by even a pixel, things could go horribly wrong for you. You reach Lloyd, and he puts you through a series of combat tests to see if you are worthy of his upgrades. The combat here gets way too intense, with the game ramping up the difficulty even further by introducing environmental hazards that could destroy you if you don't maintain your sense of situational awareness. God, I mean, look at some of this. You have all kinds of obstacles ready to crush you. You have enemies flying at you from every conceivable angle trying to grab you, laser you, slice you, the works. The level of challenge here is amazing, the kind that forces you to use everything at your disposal, making you ready for anything that the game could throw at you. You make it through, and your final test is a battle with Lloyd. His orbital frame has the most human design of the frames you've seen so far, and this is fitting. Given the divine context that the game has set up, it makes sense that the guy who believes in the power of science and technology would have the most human-looking frame to match. Lloyd covers the stage in black and you have to locate him. Luckily, Ada is able to determine the distance between you and him, and so this isn't at all difficult as long as you pay attention to what Ada tells you. She is super helpful in this game, I have to say. Rather than acting all sassy, she provides proper and insightful combat tips, though one could argue this is because of her new respect for human life. You defeat Lloyd and he deems you worthy to receive the upgrade, stating that the Zero Shift capability takes some time to settle into the system, and as such you won't be able to use it right away. Ken gets out of Jehuti to initiate the transfer of the program, but just as it installs, and just before Ken can jump back in, Anubis makes his grand reappearance. Noman arrives, and it looks as though his sanity is dwindling by the second. In his insanity, he decides not only to send projectiles down at Lloyd and Ken, effectively killing Lloyd in the process, he also then proceeds to drop a bomb that absolutely rocks Dingo's world.
Dingo, I'll tell you an interesting story. You know what happened to the Metatron you carried to Antilia on your last mission?
Who knows?
That frame.
What?
Anubis and Jehuti. These two frames were made from the Metatron you had escorted.
What did you say?
Be glad. You are one of the units for Project Auman.
So this is that Metatron?
I must thank you, Dingo.
My pals all died for that?
This will be a good battle for celebration. Come on, get me!
This enrages Dingo, knowing that the very weapon that he has been using to survive and to combat Bahram was created at the cost of his closest friends. You feel this rage, and you give it your all despite knowing you won't win. The battle ends abruptly and Lloyd's orbital frame sends a doppelganger to help Dingo escape. This is an important detail that I intend to make reference to later, but for now, let us call this a cool little ability that saves Dingo's life. Dingo escapes without Ken and receives a call from her. He promises her that he will stop Auman, in a very emotional scene where they vow that they are comrades at last after everything they've been through. Dingo is now emotionally invested in Ken, and sees her as more than just a person who resurrected him. She is a comrade, a war ally, and now he must continue fighting. At this point, Leo calls in, and he has rallied the troops of the Space Force at the entrance of Auman. And my god, if the combat scenarios weren't insane enough, just strap yourselves in because, god damn man. Did I mention yet that I absolutely love this game? Because if not, damn, I fucking love this game. Dingo intercepts communications from a fleet commander of Bahram, and shit goes from 1 to 60 really fast. We vow that we will stop the fleet for Dingo, and now we have the vector cannon, we are fully equipped to do so. The fleet is comprised of 3 very large ships, each with swarms of orbital frames ready to destroy. God damn, this gets better and better as you need to physically destroy each ship by taking out their engines. which is protected using compressed space, which is why you need the vector cannon, which is why you need to be fast, which is why you need to destroy every frame that is in the way, and which is why you need the main laser cannons to be destroyed, which is why you need to... God damn! You fucking wrecked this fleet, and they unleash their ultimate weapon on you, the Zakat. This is the giant battle of the game, and it's far more strategic than the ones from the previous games. After a bit of a strange cutscene, you finally take him to task. You have to remove bits of his outer shell to not only attack the core, but also the head, and all the while it is throwing everything it has at you. Did I mention that I love this game? After destroying the fleet, you finally meet up with the Space Force and Leo, and they are ready to go to war. Dingo gives an inspiring speech about how they all need to band together, and that he will single-handedly ensure that they win this battle. And you know what? Why the hell not? Let's do this shit, right? The game has thrown everything it has got at us, and now it's time to utterly wreck Barham's shit in every conceivable way. Ada adds a new map to your heads-up display, advises that you can heal your allies using the geyser sub-weapon, and the waves start to come. Did I mention that this game is insane? You're literally about to fight a war, and you're the most advanced fighter there. Let's fucking go! When you finally wreck their shit, the program you received from Lloyd settles in, and you have just become Anubis' equal with this newest ability, the Zero Shift. This new ability seriously changes how you approach the game. You have just become as powerful as the most powerful frame in existence, and you are capable of moving at light speeds. Even Ada refers to your new combat abilities as a quick cleanup ability. The game even tries to psych you out with small cutscenes showing new frames, but they literally stand no chance. You breeze through the tunnel leading to Almon, and you finally make it to the entrance, where you receive a call from Ken. Ken finally comes clean and tells the truth that she was never a spy. But Dingo already knew this. She urges him not to come to Almon given that Noman has gone completely off the rails. She also tells Dingo that her father, Richard, was part of his unit, and that her main reason for revolting was for him.
Richard Marinaris.
That's right.
He was good to me.
They have finally revealed the common ground, avenging the same comrade. This only strengthens Dingo's resolve to stop Noman, and he charges into Almon with Leo not too far behind. This is the true point of no return. Dingo asks Ada if he could win this fight. Ada wholeheartedly places her faith in Dingo here. We destroy some compressed space, pick up some Metatron, and now it's time for the final battle. You confront Noman, and he starts to go off about the will of Metatron. Now is a good time to cover some more etymology. I've already covered Jehuti and Nath, but we need to cover 2 more frames before we proceed. Anubis, as you know, is the main antagonist frame in this game, but the mythology doesn't necessarily align here, and it seems more like it aligns with the more human or media-based perceptions of him, as an evil god or a tyrant. This isn't necessarily fair given that Anubis was just doing his job of guiding souls to the underworld and passing judgment. However, characteristically, you could argue that Noman takes this to its logical extreme. The purpose of Almon is to cause mass destruction, and you could argue in some twisted way, Noman seeks to guide everyone to the afterlife, by more manual means. Nephthys is another god of Egyptian mythology, and appropriately is the god most associated with the dead and mourning. Viola is an AI now, and characteristically in the afterlife, is functioning from beyond the grave. She has been resurrected in order to perform her primary purpose in life, which was to fight until there was nothing left. She is mourned greatly by Dingo throughout the game, which further aligns with her goddess of choice. Characters who are aware of her express regret over her passing, and mourn accordingly. This whole concept has bugged the hell out of me since I first played these games, seeing that some people were driven insane by Metatron and others were not. Theories that approach this seem to believe that Metatron is sentient in some way, and possesses a degree of selectivity when it's applied to the orbital frames. See, Metatron is a reference to Jewish mythology, a higher-ranking angel that possessed immense power. In the mainline mythology, there isn't anything to suggest that Metatron necessarily behaved in a way to exercise his will. However, in variations, a lot is implied. In this example, I will use the tale of Abraham, and a variation I managed to find after some extensive research. For those unfamiliar, Abraham was given the task to kill his son as a display of faith, and at the last minute, God intervened saying that it was all a test, and that Abraham's son is free to live. The variation that I found actually states that the source of the divine intervention is not in fact God, but the Metatron. I was a bit dumbstruck by this at first, so I dug a little deeper by reaching out to some experts, and received confirmation that variations such as these exist where the angels cannot be identified fully. This in fact validates the theory of selective intervention even more, and in seeing this I was glad to see I wasn't going totally insane trying to link this all together. If the mythology had assumed that Metatron was the one performing all these interventions, then it makes sense that he was able to select where he exercised his will, Same with Metatron, that can exercise its will depending on who the pilot is and how it attaches to him. My own personal theory is a little different when it comes to Metatron poisoning, and it doesn't really involve mythology. I had to dig into the whole Zone of the Enders canon in order to understand this further, and thankfully, the Idolo movie was an excellent source of information for this. I personally think that Metatron poisoning is universal, and it affects everyone who uses an orbital frame. Each runner is symbiotically attached to their frames, evidenced by the fact that Idolo was able to reject Viola but accept Radium because Radium had been piloting it for so long. It actually gets to a point where any damage sustained by the frame would affect the pilot directly too, evidenced also by Radium's first experience with Idolo, where a rock hit the head of the frame, thereby causing his own head to bleed. This sort of lifts from Evangelion a little bit more because we see this sort of thing happen to Asuka when we see her battle the mass production Avas. Metatron for me appears to be an enhancer for pre-existing personality traits, and can lead to actions of good and evil depending on the goal or the mindset of the runner in question. Nomen and Idolo became mad with power because their pre-existing goals were to cause destruction or to take vengeance in some way. Viola's poisoning was a suicidal charge into battle, and relentlessly hunting Leo because of her pride. These were traits that she displayed in the Idolo movie, and they were only enhanced by her exposure to Metatron. Dingo already desired to protect and avenge his comrades, and his link to Jehuti not only further enhanced his ability to do so, but enhanced his desire to do so, his resolve gradually increasing as you go throughout the game. You fight Nomen, but something seems off. He isn't moving as fast as he usually does, he hasn't got his signature wings behind his back, and he seems to fight back in the most pathetic ways possible. Once you defeat him, Leo comes in and gauntlets the ever-living shit out of him. Dingo realizes the same thing you do, and now knows that Ken is inside that frame. It is a fake Anubis. At this point, the real thing shows up and lays the smackdown on Leo, and pretty much rains down energy, so much so that it leaves Jehuti half destroyed, and leaves Leo and Ken in a worse state. Spouting on more about Metatron and its role in the universe and how he interprets it, it is clear that Nomen has basically just cannonballed into the deep end, and that he has straight up lost what little sanity he has left. Ken also reveals that the true location of Almon is Phobos. Thrust into compressed space, you are forced to fight Anubis with naught but a blade, zero shift, and your boost capabilities. His attack patterns are pretty simple here, and Ada even recommends that you make use of a hit and run style strategy in order to defeat him. Doing this allows you to not only defeat Anubis, but absorb his Metatron energy, which boosts Jehuti's powers to godlike levels. You land on Phobos and receive a transmission from a familiar face, Elena from the first game. She goes on to explain more about the goings-on of this universe, but the main point that she covers is what will happen when Almon is activated, which, by the way, is universal destruction. Could the stakes be higher? Elena reiterates that Ada will self-destruct if Almon is activated, and so you go into the final battle, prepped and ready. Waiting inside is Anubis, this time using Almon as its energy source. Finally, the culmination of all your battles. You go into this battle with everything that you've got, with everything on the line. And this fight is absolutely legendary. Anubis' attack patterns are far less predictable at this stage, and is able to recover throughout the fight. But you too can flip the script and recover too if you manage to grab the Metatron he's absorbing. It's a real give and take and an example of a fair fight, whilst presenting you with all the challenge in the world. You are on equal ground at last, and it's time you took him to task. You finally defeat him. You give him one final blow to finish him off, for the sake of the universe, for your allies, and in the memory of your fallen comrades. Nomen is gone, but Almon activates. What follows is an intense scene where Dingo throws a last-ditch effort after seeing a charge attack from Leo has weakened Almon's startup process.
That's not enough.
If it doesn't work, do whatever you please.
180 remaining.
But don't just wait to die.
The sheer intensity and pain that Dingo is going through as Jehuti is destroyed and absorbed by Almon further cements how insane the circumstances have become. Dingo ends up inside Almon's energy field, a sort of blacked out world where he discovers what's left of Anubis and its reactor. He throws Anubis straight into the center of Almon, shutting it down, grabs Leo and gets the fuck out of there. As they head back to the nearest ship, Dingo mentions that since Jehuti and Anubis were even, the reactors would be too, and an exploding Anubis would do the job just as well. Leo is glad to see that Ada is alive, and Dingo quotes something Ken said earlier, mentioning that it was her father who said it. The fight was in his memory. In the dub it kind of falls flat, but in the sub, it hits pretty hard, realizing that Dingo had his comrades in mind during his final battle. The game ends, you are given a credit sequence where Jehuti is repaired, and you have saved the universe at last. Zone of the Enders is a bit of a weird franchise, with out-of-this-world designs and a compelling story when it wants to be, I can say with absolute certainty that whilst the first game laid the foundation for compelling mecha action, it was the sequel that really took it to the next level. And honestly, for me, it is hard to play a mecha game without comparing it to the sheer speed and intensity that the sequel is able to create. It is by no means a perfect franchise. The dub falls flat due to the delivery and the translation at the time, and the first game compared to the sequel hasn't really aged all that well. But it's still a series that needs to be experienced because there's a bit of something there for everyone. Action, narrative, and even some mythology if you're looking hard enough. Not a perfect series, but god is it an absolute thrill ride from start to finish. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the video. I appreciate your viewership as always, and if you got any enjoyment or anything like that from this video, I'm glad to see it. Why not drop a like, why not drop a comment, and if you're new here, why not subscribe to the channel? I have a lot more of these coming in store. I'm thinking of abandoning Let's Plays altogether because they just use up a lot of time. But as always, it's great to see you here, and I will see you on the next episode.